Inspiration comes in a lot of different ways. A lot of times it's looking through old photos. I have a collection not only of photographs that I've taken in the past, but I also ended up with my grandfather's collection of slides from like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. He was just a hobbyist, never anything close to professional, but it's been a treasure trove to be able to have access to those photos. I like collecting old magazines, like photography magazines, and that's been a big inspiration. Sometimes just finding stuff on the internet. People ask me, like, can you create a recipe that mimics this look? So that's where like some of it comes from.
Hey guys, this is Jen with Mike's Camera. I'm here with Ritchie Roesch. He's a Fujifilm creator who's done some events for us with Fujifilm, like photo walks and stuff like that. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of get his story, hear a little bit more about what he does. And of course, if you guys have any questions too, you can probably drop them in the comments below and I can get them over to him. But Ritchie, can you tell us how you got started in photography?
So, I've had an interest in photography for a really long time. Ever since I was a kid, I actually lived on Treasure Island, which sits in the middle of San Francisco Bay. And when I was a kid, my dad was in the Navy, and we lived in the military housing there. And I was, I think, around 12 years old. And the beauty of the place, as far as you could see, like the skyline, especially it was around Christmas time, and they had all the high rises decorated for Christmas and that kind of thing. And I really wanted a camera for Christmas, and it was kind of like Christmas Story where he wanted the Red Ryder BB gun. It was like that. I wanted a camera, and I ended up getting like a 110 film camera for Christmas that year. And I was a little disappointed in the quality, but it was still fun nonetheless. And then later, I was able to, as a teenager, borrow my dad's Sears 35mm film camera, and I took this between my senior year in high school and my freshman year in college. I took a big road trip with some friends, and I brought just a whole bunch of film and went on this road trip, took hundreds of pictures. I was like excited when I got back. I dropped off the film at the 1 hour photo lab, and when I got it back I was so disappointed. They were so bad, out of focus, underexposed dramatically or overexposed dramatically, and that kind of stuff. And so I determined that I was going to learn how to take a picture. I enrolled in Photography 101 in college that freshman year, and just fell in love with photography. And that's how it all started. I've been pretty much a hobbyist for a long time. Starting out in film, I was one of those digital holdouts. I was like, I don't like digital. I'm a film photographer, and and for about 10 years I resisted digital. And then about 2009, I think, is when it was, I bought my first digital camera and started down that journey. And then in 2016, I got my first Fujifilm camera, and that's how I got started with that brand. I have a website called Fuji X Weekly, which is a photography blog about all things Fujifilm. It started out as an X100F journal, like a long-term review of that camera back in 2017, and it's just kind of morphed over the years into what it is today. It focuses on film simulation recipes, which are JPEG settings for your Fujifilm camera that mimic different aesthetics, particularly analog films. There's about 400 film simulation recipes on the website and in the Fuji X Weekly app, which was launched in 2020. It's grown quite a bit, and I have done some work with Fujifilm. For example, I was at the B&H Build Expo. I helped them with their booth, and specifically with the Fujifilm Xe5 station. So it has been fun to do some work with Fujifilm and partner with the company. And even with the Fujifilm Xe5, it's the first Fujifilm camera that actually uses the term recipe in the camera menu and in the manual. It's kind of funny how that word recipe has just grown and kind of almost taken a life of its own. On some things they've partnered with me, and that's been really cool. Something I never imagined would happen, so I'm very grateful and thankful that has happened. And it's been wonderful because it has facilitated myself being able to meet so many people, so many Fujifilm photographers in person. Done some photo walks with Mike's Camera, which has been just amazing, and Fujifilm helped facilitate those. So it is that partnership that allows it to happen, and that's my favorite part of it, is being able to go out and just talk to and shake hands with, have conversations with all the people that use Fujifilm cameras and use film simulation recipes and all that kind of stuff.
So what camera did you start shooting, and when did you get your first Fujifilm camera?
So my very first camera was a Canon AE1. Such a iconic camera. You know, a lot of people's first cameras were Canon AE1s, and it was really good. So I used that, and I also used a Pentax K1000 for like my film photography. And so when I started with digital, I don't remember what Pentax model it was, but I chose Pentax because the K-mount lenses were compatible. So I could use my lenses from the K1000 on the Pentax DSLR, which I thought was cool. But I felt like jumping into digital was like learning photography all over again. It was so much different. And there was a steep learning curve, and I was never satisfied with the Pentax camera. Not that it was bad or anything like that, but just it was different. It was so much different. And I kind of jumped from brand to brand like a lot of people do. I tried, Samsung when they made the NX cameras, Sigma, the DP Merrill cameras, Nikon. I had a Canon, Sony. I've been across all the brands. And I was experiencing some burnout, I think, around 2016. I had always had an interest in Fujifilm cameras. I'd seen them in the magazines and YouTube videos and stuff like that, and they always looked really cool, and I thought that I would like them, but they had always kind of been a little out of reach as far as my budget. So I decided to buy a used Fujifilm X-E1, which at the time was probably 6 years old or something like that. I forget, but it definitely was not a newer model, and I just fell in love with Fujifilm for the tactile controls, the shutter knob on top. It just made so much sense coming from that, film photography background. It just felt so natural. It's like, why are all digital cameras made like this? Of course, not everybody has my experience. Not everybody started out with film and that kind of stuff. And I think the camera that you started out on has a big impact on what feels most natural to you. So that it just felt really natural, and then it was probably close to a year later that I discovered that their JPEGs are really good. I didn't initially understand that. The advice I was given, as a newly into digital photography person, was that you shoot RAW, right? You got to shoot RAW, you got to edit RAW. Only amateurs do JPEG. And so, that's what I did, like a lot of people. And then I kind of realized that the JPEGs on the Fujifilm cameras are actually really good. That's when I started experimenting with adjusting the parameters and getting different looks and creating recipes.
Can you tell me more about this film simulation, please?
Yeah, so the film simulations that come on the Fujifilm, there's 20 of them now. Back then there was less. You take those and you adjust the highlights, the shadows, the white balance, the color, and those kind of things, and you can create different looks. And that combination of JPEG settings is what is called a film simulation recipe. And so if you program in those certain parameters into your camera, which utilizes the film simulations along with the other options, other JPEG options, you can mimic the looks of various films or different things like that. Like you could take classic chrome and make it look more like Kodachrome, or you could make it look more like Portra by just doing different parameter adjustments. So, and that's what a recipe is.
So Ritchie, can you tell me about where you came up with your name, Fujifilm Weekly, and also, I guess, what you do with that, what you do with the community and kind of day-to-day tasks and things that you do, daily life?
It's hard to define myself, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I am a photographer. I am an app developer. I'm a blogger. So in that sense, maybe I'm a writer. So I guess I wear a lot of hats. I don't necessarily do photography professionally as my career. It's more the app development and the blogging, which is facilitated by the photography. In the Fujifilm world, I would say that a number of my photographs are recognizable because they have been seen in people's YouTube videos or websites where they are showcasing the film simulation recipes that I've created. I don't necessarily get hired out to photograph event or building or every once in a while I'll do some work like that, but I don't need to do that kind of work. It's the website, it's the app development that pays the bills, if you will. I think ideally I would love to do some photo books and be able to do like, photo walks, and events like that, do retreats and that kind of thing. I think helping the community is really what I have a passion for, more than, having a career where I'm hired out to travel to Iceland and take photos. That would be amazing. But, I would rather be able to help the community. And that's, so many people have helped me along the way, so being able to give back in that sense is always a good thing. And I think it's what I enjoy. So and that's why Fuji X Weekly has been successful, is because it is helping the community. It's helping people achieve the look they want in an easier or more enjoyable way. The things that I do, a lot of it is community building in that sense. And so if, being able to continue that would be just amazing. And I hope that's what I can do. That's kind of where I'm at, like as a professional, is just helping the community. So Fuji X Weekly, the name. So the website started out as a Fuji X100F journal, right? I wasn't sure where it was going to lead to. I wanted the name to be somewhat vague, not too specific. Like I could have named it, FujiX100F.com or something like that, And then eventually, once I moved on to a different Fujifilm camera, then that wouldn't have made sense anymore. And then the weekly part of it was that I had dedicated that I would do one post a week. And it ended up being that I did more than one post a week on most weeks. But that was what I was like, okay, I can commit to one post a week. So it's going to be a weekly thing. And then the weekly thing doesn't make a lot of sense, anymore, because it's very rare that I only post once a week, But that's where it comes from, was just that commitment to do one post a week in the early days of it. So
Can you tell us about this film simulation and like how you come up with these different recipes and simulations? Like what inspires you to create them?
yeah, that's a great question. Inspiration comes in a lot of different ways. A lot of times it's looking through old photos. I have a collection not only of photographs that I've taken in the past, but I also ended up with my grandfather's collection of slides from like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. He was just a hobbyist, never anything close to professional, but it's been a treasure trove to be able to have access to those photos. I like collecting old magazines, like photography magazines. That's been a big inspiration. Sometimes just finding stuff on the internet. People ask me, like, can you create a recipe that mimics this look? So that's where like some of it comes from. One recipe, I saw an old Kodak brand puzzle in a thrift store, and that was the inspiration. So inspiration can come from all sorts of ways, but usually it starts off with some actual examples of film photographs, either ones that I have or ones that I've found in magazines or online. And then I do research, like how when was this film made, what was it used for, especially if I don't have personal experience with it. If I have personal experience, I can lean back into that. But of course, even with that, your memory of it may be different than the reality of it. I've encountered that where I thought, like, this looks just like this film looks like, and then I go out and actually look at the photos, and I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't the same. And Fujifilm calls that memory color. Actually, it's their term, where you remember something a certain way, the colors of it, but in reality, it's a little bit different. There's just a lot of research that typically goes into it, a lot of testing, a lot of trial and error to get the looks to be correct, or at least how I feel they are correct. And a film can have a lot of different looks, especially you talk about like a negative film. Did you overexpose it? Did you underexpose it? What lens did you use? Did you use a warming filter or polarization filter? How was it developed? Were the chemicals fresh? What chemicals did you use? What was your, there's darkroom recipes, for developing film and stuff. What recipe did you use for developing it? On top of that, did you scan it? What brand of scanner? What did you do with that scan? Or did you print it? Or did you scan the print? There's like so many variables that it would be impossible to come up with a film simulation recipe that mimics all of that. So you have to get like very specific with how you're doing it and try and mimic like one specific aspect. And even that can be correct in certain light and incorrect in other light, that kind of stuff, just because of the limitations of the settings available in the camera.
Can you tell me some of the benefits to film simulation? What can people expect from creating these or from using these recipes?
You know, a lot of people, they want, either they don't enjoy like editing their raw files in, Lightroom Capture One or whatever program they use. It's maybe something they don't enjoy, or maybe it's something that they're intimidated by and don't want to learn. Or in some cases, it's even like somebody has like a color blindness or something like that, a visual impairment where they can't trust their own vision to know if the colors look right. So they need something that is more concrete that they know will look good. So there's all sorts of different reasons why somebody may want to use a film simulation recipe and may not want to edit their raw photos. And even with recipes, they can be used in many different ways. They don't necessarily have to be used in the way that I use them, which is to avoid editing, because that was my thing, is I edited raw photos for a long time and I just did not enjoy it. It took a lot of my time, and it just wasn't fun for me. But I still did it for years, and it really changed my life when I stopped and started relying on the straight out of camera JPEG. But for some people, they use recipes in ways that I wouldn't have thought of. I mean, one way that is obvious is that you could still edit the JPEG. There's still a lot of room for manipulation, and so some people do that. They'll do some light to moderate edits to the JPEG file and not worry about the raw. That saves them space, and it's a little quicker to work with it that way. Another way that some people use it is that they still edit the raw, but they find a recipe that is similar to their aesthetic that they're looking for, right? And so that they can pre-visualize the finished picture easier by looking at the scene through the recipe, which is similar to their style. So that's really cool. There's a photographer that will shoot raw in JPEG, he'll edit the raw, and then he'll layer the JPEG over top of it and blend it in. There's all sorts of ways. There's no right or wrong way to do photography. And that's the great thing about photography, is there's a million different ways you can do it. And none of it is incorrect. It's just what works for you as the photographer. And so it's been great to help facilitate and basically make it okay to shoot JPEG, because there's been a lot of times people say, no, you're doing it wrong. If you're not editing raw, you're doing it wrong, right? And they'll kind of gatekeep how photography must be done, to be able to facilitate for those who don't want to do it that way a process that maybe works better for them. Is just really fantastic,
Yes, thank you so much for that. Great advice. You guys just grab your camera, take it with you, go on that adventure. You never know what you can find, right? This is Jen with Mike's Camera, Ritchie, Fujifilm Creative, and thank you so much for watching. Talk to you guys later. Bye.